And then right there, that's a deer rub.
Where is that?
A deer will rub its antlers on.
Oh yeah, where that bark is.
Yep. So a deer will rub its
antlers.
antlers to mark that it was there. They have a gland on their forehead, and they'll rub their antlers. And so, the bigger the deer, the bigger the rub they will choose. They'll choose a bigger tree to rub their antlers on. So that's obviously just a little deer. That's a little one. And then they'll usually just work their way right down. They'll make what's called a rub line. Oh, there, you can see another one in there. A little further.
Where is it? Oh, right there?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a little one. And again, they'll follow the edges, the direction they come at the tree. You can be like, okay, that deer was heading in this direction, so it came from over there. All right, so it's just a short 20-mile hike. All uphill.
Oh, that means it's downhill on the way back then, right?
Oh, no, we'll take a different way back. It's
okay.
Uphill that way as well. When you can see the dew claw like that means it's a bigger deer.
It's because more weight pushing down into the dirt.
And then you get an idea of how big this is obviously smaller deer. And then I think I saw some little fawn footprints back here.
Our hearts they are stout, and our bows they are good, as well their masters know. They're called in the forest of merry Sherwood, and never will spare a foe. Our arrows shall drink of the fallow deer's blood, we'll hunt them all o'er the plain, and through the wide forest of merry Sherwood, no shaft shall fly in vain. Those lines come from an 18th century song sung by John Beard, and is of course just one of many examples one can find that relates to Robin Hood and his merry men hunting the deer in the forests of Sherwood and Barnesdale. Even going all the way back to the Jest of Robin Hood from the 1400s, one can find stanzas such as these. "It is fair gone," said Robin, "that I was last here, me list a little for to shoot at the donna deer. Robin slew a full great hart, his horn then gan he blow, that all the outlaws of that forest, that horn could they know." A common trope in the films and television shows is for Robin Hood to come to the rescue of a poacher, and for there to be scenes of feasting in the heart of the greenwood. And since most Robin Hood scholars posit that the notion of robbing from the rich and giving to the poor wasn't exactly a major theme in the early tales, the notion of Robin Hood as a hunter has an even deeper, longer lineage than that of a crusader for social welfare. Although, one might make the case that since all of the deer would have been considered the property of the king, he was still robbing from the rich by shooting them, and a whole lot of meat would have gone to waste if he didn't share it. But with this being such a crucial and long-standing aspect of the Robin Hood legend, I wanted to learn a little bit more about what it would actually be like to hunt a deer with bow and arrow. And while I look forward to talking more in later episodes with experts on historical hunting and archery, I thought I'd start by tagging along with a modern bow hunter and really get out into the greenwood myself. What follows is an interview with the hunter Chad Garlinghouse, primarily recorded in his basement, but interspersed with audio taken from our time in the woods and in his truck. I've done my best to level out the audio, but at times we were literally whispering so as not to frighten the deer that were just a few feet away from us. So I am here with Chad Garlinghouse.
Yes.
In his basement, as opposed to over a Zoom chat, unlike most of my interviews.
Yeah.
But we have not just been in his basement. We got back from a hunt earlier today. We were on your property doing a hunt for deer. I wanted to talk with Chad because he is somebody who engages with bow hunting. And in the lore of Robin Hood, it's one of the few things that he is established as doing. He robs from the rich, he gives to the poor. He also poaches the king's deer. And so I wanted to talk to somebody who, well, doesn't poach, but hunts with a bow. So, Chad, would you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with bow hunting?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, I'm Chad. I live in Michigan. I lived here my whole life. Like most people from Michigan, hunting is a huge part of a family tradition. My dad hunted, I think he said 50 years recently.
Oh, wow.
It might be 52 now. His dad was a hunter. His dad's dad was a hunter. Everyone's been a hunter, so it wasn't even a question. If you're a male born into this family, you're probably going to get into hunting. And so, of course, I did as a kid, and I've always liked bow hunting more than gun. We talked about this in the blind, but the weather is nicer. The leaves are changing. The deer are up close and personal. Oh, I like bow hunting more because I like this weather. You know, rifle hunting, all the leaves are down. It's cold. Your toes get cold. You got to really bundled up.
So it's because there's a more limited time of year when you can do the rifle hunting.
Yeah.
It's got to be later when it's colder.
The rifle season doesn't start till November 15th. You know, and a couple years ago, I was hunting up in the upper peninsula of Michigan where we have a cabin. And in the morning, it was negative 30. And it's like, I'm going to go sit in a shack like this, like we're in right now. It's negative 30.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
yeah, that would be
I mean, it's just
very unpleasant.
Yeah. I mean, you're still outside. I'm not at work. But, or we could just sit out here on a day like this. What's it right now? 55? You know? It's 55. The leaves are changing.
Oh, yeah.
There's no wind.
Lovely out.
I mean, I could sit here all day. I mean, I have 3 kids at home, a dog, 2 cats. This is great.
It hadn't occurred to me that the weather would be a incentive for bow hunting as opposed to rifle hunting, but that makes sense.
Yep. And then you're a lot more up close and personal with the deer. Rifle, you could shoot them at 100 yards. With my bow, I don't shoot anything past 30.
Okay.
And so those pink flags, you see, that's 25 yards. So that's how close the deer has to be. So there could be the biggest buck I've ever seen in my entire life sitting right over there next to that pile of dirt from the other end of the food plot. And I can't shoot it. It's too far. I wouldn't even know where to aim. I don't practice out that far. And a deer can hear the twang of your bow.
Sure.
And there's been videos.
So it's got more time to run off.
They duck it.
It's going to move.
They duck the arrow. So there's videos that show how fast a deer's reflex is to that sound and how fast they drop down. They turn themselves sideways. It's the weirdest thing. Like, imagine, you know, this is the audio podcast. So a deer's spine is parallel to the ground. But when they hear the shot of a bow, they turn their spine so it's perpendicular to the ground, like it drops back. So if it's running, you know, like here's the ground and here's the spine, it's running parallel. They drop it so it's their whole body, the rib cage turns perpendicular.
So it's almost like they fall to their side.
They fall to their side, so they turn inside out almost. It's crazy, but it's so they can drop down as fast as possible and duck the arrow.
Yeah.
Because they know it's most likely coming from above. Like if we're not in a tree stand, but a lot of people hunt from tree stands. I would be hunting in a tree stand right now if you weren't here. You know, you can get in sneakier spots. I struggled as a kid using the bow because I wasn't very strong. I was kind of pretty scrappy, and so I could never pull back a bow that actually could shoot fast enough to be pretty much legal to bow hunt with. But once I got strong enough, I was out in the woods. So I was hunting at the age I could hunt, which was 12. But it wasn't until I was pretty close to 12 before I could actually use a bow that was strong enough to to kill a deer, and I'm 42, so I actually used to use my fingers. I'd have finger grips and no releases back then. Everyone just used your fingers. So that's how I learned. It was a compound bow. It was a Fredbear bow. Mm-hmm. And I had finger tabs on my fingers.
I've actually been to the Fredbear Museum.
Yeah.
It was outside of Gainesville, Florida, where I used to live.
Yeah, it got moved there.
Yeah.
It used to be up in... There's actually a picture of me. I think I was like 1 month. And my mom and dad had gone to the museum. There's a picture of me, my mom carrying me, of course, in the Fredbear Museum.
Neat. Yeah, I remember being really excited to go to the museum because I knew it was somebody who was famous for doing bow hunting.
Longbow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so as a kid who was interested in archery, just in my mind, I kind of imagined it as a museum about archery.
No.
But it wasn't that.
No.
It was mostly, hey, look at all the trophies that
pretty
this guy
much,
shot. Yeah.
What a lovely room of death you have here, as Ace Ventura would say.
Exactly. Now, I mentioned Robin Hood as a poacher earlier, but it's really important to note that there's a particular context to that story having to do with medieval ages, people starving.
Yep.
We're meant to think of Robin Hood as a heroic figure, and that the poaching is acceptable because the alternative is starvation.
Correct.
That is not the situation at all with your lifestyle, with responsible hunting. So would you talk a little bit about some of the problems that would arise from the idea of poaching and the steps that you take to be, a properly authorized and responsible hunter?
Yeah, sure. So you have to take a hunter safeties course, which my son is taking right now. It's virtual now. When I took it, you met for the whole thing. Now you take it virtually, and then you meet for like a class ending instruction with instructors, and it teaches you proper gun handling is really the biggest thing. No accidental shootings with a gun. I don't think they cover archery too much. It's a lot harder to accidentally shoot someone with a bow than it is with a gun. So in Michigan, you have to take hunter safety, and then every year you buy your license, which includes a base tag. So in addition to the tag for the animal you are going after, you also have to buy the base tag. And then there is areas within the state anyone can hunt. We have public land. So as long as you're on public land with a valid hunting license on your person, carrying the proper weapon for the season it is, and hunting an animal that's in season, you're okay. And then if you have private property, everything still applies. It's just a lot harder to get caught if you're poaching because there's no game wardens just walking around, checking on you. The joke is if you're ever lost on public land, just poach an animal and a game warden will find you within a couple minutes and you won't be lost anymore. But as far as any other thing illegal, you only hunt in season is probably the biggest thing. Road hunting is probably the biggest felony that you see happening the most. It's where
road hunting?
Yeah, so people will have guns in their vehicle and they'll see a deer in the field and they'll just stop on the side of the road. Of course, this isn't like on an expressway in like Detroit. I'm talking like out in the country roads.
Sure.
And they see a deer and they'll shoot it. And
like on the way back from our hunt earlier today, we passed a field and we saw 5 deer in.
Yeah, we could have easily, if you had a loaded gun with you, could have slammed to a stop, rolled down the window. Windows would already be down, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And stick the gun out and blast one. But then you have to get it and throw it in your car. I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of like the Wild West where people just shoot to shoot because they're horrible people. So no, don't do any of that. Mm-hmm. So
and then you're shooting onto somebody's land and you've not checked that space. You have no idea.
Yeah.
That
it's
dangerous on a number of levels.
It happens. It happens a lot more than I think it gets caught. So it's a real shame that it happens because it's not right.
Yeah. When we were out, we discussed a little bit your bow. We had a little discussion about the arrowheads versus the mechanical broadheads
and fixed
and the fixed broadheads.
Mm-hmm.
I notice you have this arrow tip that's going to have these sort of flanges that are pointing out, and I'm assuming that's to kind of cause sort of extra damage as it kind of tears into a deer there.
Yeah, you're not even seeing it at its worst. So that's a mechanical broadhead. So it's plunger activated. So when the tip hits something, those things actually expand out and create a much bigger hole.
Ooh. Yeah, so it's much different than just like a little
field
simple
tip.
field tip
Yeah.
that you would use for target shooting.
Yep. Yeah.
Is it a little more aerodynamic than just having a broad-headed point to start with?
There, you've touched on a subject that is debated fiercely.
Oh, really?
Mechanical or fixed blade, which is better? I've always hunted with fixed blade. I've never actually shot a deer with these mechanical ones yet, but I decided to give them a try. So,
what's the argument for one versus the other?
oh, just what you said. It flies better. A mechanical broadhead could fail, so it doesn't open up.
Okay.
Fixed blade, maybe they're not as aerodynamic because they're
broad,
they're broader, they're bigger,
heavier.
yeah. So it's, you name it. People argue about it. There's a lot of factors, though.
Yeah, but I suspect just the facet of it being traditional appeals to people.
Yeah. Either way, they're expensive. I think if one was so much cheaper than the other, there'd be no debate. But they're both expensive. They both are expensive. So.
You had your camouflage pants and jacket, and that you kept in a scent bag.
Yep.
So it's separated from your other belongings. So it doesn't pick up other scent from around your house or garage or wherever.
Yep.
And you pulled out some devices to make calling noises.
Yeah.
To make grunts. You had a
Bleat.
rangefinder.
Yep.
And you had binoculars.
Yep.
Any other kind of pieces of your kind of kit or useful equipment that you tend to bring?
So we were sitting in a ground blind, and it has windows that can open really big, so you can shoot a bow out. But it also serves as a rifle blind, because in the rifle season, it gets pretty cold. So having a roof over your head is really nice. But if you weren't with me, I probably would have been up in a tree stand, because only one person can sit in that. You would have been on a branch somewhere, and that hunt would have lasted 10 minutes, because you could not have handled sitting on a branch for more than 10 minutes. Nobody can. But if I was in
I see it happen in Robin Hood movies all the time. It must be totally fine.
Yeah, no, they're... no. If I was in a tree stand, I definitely would have been wearing my safety harness. So it's mine. There's a bunch of different kinds, but mine is a vest it's like a 5-point harness. So it goes in between your down below your crotch, around your thighs, and then over your shoulders. And then there's a strap on the back that you attach to something you've affixed to the tree at shoulder height when you're standing. And then so then if you ever did fall out of the stand, you would just be dangling there, and hopefully you have some way of getting hold of somebody. So you should also have your cell phone, which, it used to not be a thing, but now having a cell phone is really just in case you get in trouble somehow and you need to call somebody to help. Because most likely you're not getting out of that. Your ladder stand or whatever is down on the ground somewhere, and you're dangling from a tree.
It's one of those things where, no, technically it's not needed. And yes, for decades, for hundreds of years, we got by without them. And so some people might scoff at that notion. Oh, you need your cell phone. We didn't need these before.
Right.
But you have the tools. You use them.
Right.
Also, people used to get stuck, and sometimes die because they'd be stranded out.
They get exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the very least, just tell somebody where you're going to be. Like, you should always have a hunting buddy that's at least aware. I mean, if you're worried about the guy stealing your spot, well, then pick somebody who's not a hunter and just go, look, this is where I hunt. I mean, I know you're not a hunter, so you're not going to steal my spots. But if I ever go out hunting and then someone's like, Chad hasn't come back yet, at least you know where I could be.
Yeah.
Like, these are his spots, so let's go check them.
Yeah.
My property's 60 acres. Won't take long to search the entire property, but on a cold, wet night or something, So yeah, your cell phone. Piece of equipment you didn't list is I had bow hooks. So places where I hang my bow, so it's at easy reach, so I don't lay it on the ground where you could actually step on it. It's actually hanging from in the blind. It was hanging from the ceiling. In a tree, they have hooks that have extensions, and so the bow is usually hanging right at arm's length. So you just reach out and grab it with the hand you don't pull back the bow with. You grab it with your other. So mine, it's your non-dominant hand, and you just can instantly grab the bow with the least amount of movement possible. Because believe me, those deer, they're watching.
And you alluded to a piece of equipment earlier also that I didn't mention, and that's the release that you use.
Oh, yeah.
For the arrows.
Yeah.
What are all of the kind of equipment that you use for the actual like bow, arrow, release, firing mechanisms?
So my bow has a drop rest. So the arrow sits up. It looks like a tuning fork. So it sits in a little groove, and then when you shoot, it drops down as the arrow goes through. So it's not a fixed rest that the arrow is resting on. Now, Robin Hood and longbows usage, a lot of times you see in movies, Lord of the Rings, where the arrow is actually resting on the fingers of the person holding the bow.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult and very inconsistent unless you've practiced at it. And then it can be just as consistent as I use. But I use it's a drop away rest. And then I have the string has what's called a D loop, which is just a piece of parachute cord that makes it looks like the letter D. So if you imagine the string of the bow is the straight line of the D, the D loop is the curve of the D, a capital D. And that's just a loop that pokes out from the back of the bowstring. And then you attach your release to it, which is like a pincher of some sort. And it usually has some sort of trigger on it. And so when you pull the bow back, you're pulling on that D loop, which is attached to the string, and the nock of the arrow, which is the part of the arrow that attaches to the string, goes in between the D loop edges. So the D loop is like around where the nock goes. And then, so when you pull that back, it should be right back by your ear. And if you have a kisser button on your bow, which is, it's literally just an anchor point. So it's just a little button. It looks exactly like a button. And it doesn't matter where it hits you on the face. It just should hit you on the face at the exact same spot.
Place, yeah.
So then you know that you're holding your bow correctly and everything should be lined up. And then when you pull the trigger on the release, you fire your bow. But there are releases.
So there's a trigger mechanism on the release?
Yeah, it looks just like a trigger on a gun.
Interesting.
Yep. But there are some that are not trigger released. They are... I don't use it. So it's something like back pressure or back. Basically, when you've pulled the string back as far as it could possibly go, and then you keep applying pressure to the release because you keep pulling back on it, it will release itself. And so you're not actually pulling the trigger, and it's used by a lot of people, but a lot of competitive target shooters use this type of release. The reason being, they don't have the slight jerking motion of triggering the trigger. That just pulling that trigger, you have to kind of send an impulse from your brain to your hand to tell you to pull the trigger. And that can cause a slight wobble. Now, hunting a deer, you don't have to be perfect. But these target shooters who are trying to hit the X's, they do. And so a lot of them use these, I wish I could remember what they were called, but these pressure releases that basically fire because they've just pulled back at a certain point. And so you should just be lined up at that point. And I've tried shooting those things and I almost sent an arrow into a light because I wanted to pull a trigger and I couldn't, it was hard. It was very hard to get used to, but I could see why target shooters would use it.
When you were trying it, was it target shooting or hunting?
Oh, target shooting. Oh, yeah. Just someone said, here, try my release. Have you ever tried one of these before? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so different than anything I've ever done. But I could see how it works, and I could see if you got used to it, how it would be helpful. But I don't think I want to get used to this. This is not something I need to use because I'm primarily a hunter. I was on some archery leagues for a while.
Yeah.
But just kids stuff.
When you were young.
Yeah.
How about things that aren't deer? Do you ever hunt anything besides deer?
No. I think it would be great to hunt a bear. That'd be fun.
I feel that would be very intimidating to try to hunt a bear with a bow.
Yeah. But it'd be fun. In Michigan, as far as like bow hunting goes, I mean, bear and deer are pretty much it.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you could coyote, but...
Not squirrels or anything?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not Katniss.
What advice would you give to anyone who might be interested in getting into bow hunting and didn't know where to start?
I would say try to get cheap equipment first because it's a very expensive initial sport. There's a lot of money up front you pay, but my bow is 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was about $1,000 once it was all fitted out.
Yeah.
But it's $100 a year at this point, so that's not that bad. Although I could use a new one. It's getting a little old. But so if you're thinking of getting into it, maybe find somebody about your size that's the same dominant hand as you that would let you kind of borrow their stuff to see if you even like it, or Facebook Marketplace, eBay, local bow clubs. Usually there's people.
Don't drop that $1,000 on the bow.
Which
might be more now, given that was 10 years ago.
Exactly. So slow down with the initial purchasing to see if you like it, because it doesn't matter if you're using great equipment, good equipment, or mediocre equipment to start with. You're gonna kind of stink no matter what at first, and then even a bad bow will shoot consistently if it's not the top of the line bow. I mean, once you get the hang of it, how it shoots. I would say, shoot at targets. Hopefully you found a friend that also likes to shoot and already knows how to shoot, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and a lot of times you don't know what mistake you're making until somebody points it out. Because I've taken videos of myself shooting, and I'm like, what is going on with my elbow? Like, why is it so high above? And it just, how come no one told me my elbow looks like this when I shoot? It should be down. I shouldn't be lifting it way up above my head like this. It should be back, more straight behind my ear. And lo and behold, I started shooting better after I did that. So having people help you. One of the things I learned was somebody saying, when you decide that you like it, and maybe you decide to upgrade your equipment and get a better bow, and you're really going to try to start sighting it in and getting good, your best thing you could do is not shoot at one of those great big targets with the huge circles everywhere. You actually want to shoot at just a white, it doesn't have to be white, but just a solid color surface, and then take 2 pieces of electrical tape and make an X, and just aim for that X, because the motto is aim small, miss small. Mm-hmm. And so if you just are aiming at this very small X from 15 yards even, you're just going to get so used to just looking at that tiny spot. And when you have those great big circles on those big targets, you're looking at a lot, and you might be like, oh, I got 2 in the yellow and 2 in the blue. And what? It's like, yeah, but you really missed a lot. Like, where were you aiming? Were you aiming for the center of the center? Because you really didn't hit there at all. But if you just start aiming at something small, and also the reason you want it to be an X. Actually, I shouldn't say X. It should be a plus sign. Actually, you can start to really see, like, man, all my arrows are always in the upper right quadrant. So I need to adjust my sights, down and to the left, which actually would be you move your sight up and to the right. But because wherever you move your sight, you move your arrow actually goes the opposite way. It's really good at tuning in your bow. And then when you start shooting at these big targets, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Like, this is so much area to shoot at, but you should still be looking small, because that's
another difference between a nice compound bow like you have and a longbow.
Oh, 100%. Because you can hold a compound bow back for quite a while.
Well, and you have a sight.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and then of course, if you're actually interested in getting involved in hunting, then you need to look into whatever local regulations there are for the state in which you live.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Bow season in Michigan goes from October 1st till, I know December 31st you can hunt. I don't know if there's any time in January, because there is like a late muzzleloader season for doe or something in January. I don't know. It's hard to keep track. But by then, bow hunting is pretty hard because it's pretty cold.
And of course, it can vary from state to state, or country to country. Mm-hmm. For here in Michigan, how much does it cost to take the safety training course and to get your license?
Right now, the training course I think is $25 or $30. That's a one-time fee, and then to get your license, your base tag, plus a lot of times people get what's called the combo, which lets you shoot 2 bucks. So right now in the area where I hunt, the combo tag, your one tag is for any buck with an antler 3 inches or longer, just one antler. And then the second tag, you have to have 4 points on a side. And then you can get doe tags. And when it's all said and done, your base tag plus those 3 tags, I think is $70 or $80.
Okay. And then that's annually.
So those are the tags you buy so you can go hunt the deer. But you can, if you fill your doe tag in Michigan right now, you can go and buy another doe tag. I think they're $20 a piece.
So it's based on how many you get.
In Michigan, though, the buck tag is either you buy the 2 up front in the combo, or you buy 1 buck tag. But you can't go back and buy a second buck tag after you've just bought the 1 and filled it.
If you get a buck tag, but then fail to shoot any deer, is that buck tag still going to be good the next year until you get one? You still need to
every year
buy a new one and pay that new fee.
Yeah.
So it is annual in that way.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and then again, all of these laws are subject to change.
Yep. They change every year. They change every year.
And they are going to be different in every region. So wherever you live, make sure that you are finding the most recent regulations.
Yeah, and don't ask on Facebook. I've been a member of some hunting Facebook groups. And when I say Facebook, that's just code for social media. Don't ask on social media, because the best place to find out the actual regulations of the area you want to hunt is your local Department of Natural Resources, or whatever it would be called, where you are, because they will have the answers, and you can get the name of the person who gave you that answer. And then if he screwed up or she screwed up, at least you can say, this is the person I talked to. But if you screw up and then say, well, Marty on Facebook said it was okay, that doesn't hold water.
Yep.
So
go directly to the official.
Go to the source.
Yep.
There's documentation out there too. There should be. In Michigan, we have our Deer Digest that comes out every year that spells out the regulations. And on these forums and stuff I'm on, when people start asking hunting regulation questions, the first person replies with a link to the digital version of the thing, and then the moderator shuts down the thread. So no one else can weigh in. It's like, nope, this is where you find the information.
Do you have any particular memories of a hunt or a shot that you're especially proud of? What's your good hunting story?
Oh wait, shoot. Okay, so you added that I was proud of at the end, because I had a story.
Well, I'll take both.
Okay,
how about can we get proudest and humbling?
Oh, this was more of a shock. So when my dad and I, as I said, we were both hunters, and he got me into archery. And so in our backyard, we had a hay bale with, and we'd put a cardboard target on it and shoot at the cardboard target. And so the cardboard target was held on with the bungee cord thing that was holding the hay bales together. So it was 2 hay bales. I should say probably straw bales on top of each other, and then a big bungee cord wrapped around them, the thick black rubber kind. And then we would just slide the target in behind the bungee to hold it in place.
Sure.
And then usually, the bungee would be back by the back legs. So you had the whole front shoulder area that you're supposed to be aiming at to shoot at. And so my dad and I were shooting, standing side by side shooting. And he said, "Hey, Chad, you want to see if I can hit the bungee cord just for the heck of it?" I mean, we're just using field tips. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, Dad, that sounds great." So,
how old were you?
I believe I was around 10.
Okay.
And so I'm standing there just watching, and my dad is an amazing shot. He's incredibly good with the bow. And
these are compound bows also?
Compound bows, yes. Yep. And he aimed at the bungee cord and hit it.
Nice.
Which sent the arrow directly backwards.
Oh, not nice.
Flying. And I just remember us standing there side by side. He shot the bow, twing, and then whew, the arrow whizzing in between our 2 heads.
Oh, wow.
And we both just looked at each other, and he goes, "Well, that was really stupid." I go, "Yeah, it was. That could have been bad." We didn't. So don't do that. Yes. Don't do that. Don't aim at things that are rubber.
Right.
It seems so obvious now. I don't know what we were thinking.
I suppose, I asked you how old you were. I should have asked how old your dad was.
But see, you didn't anticipate that coming. You just thought it would puncture that big rubber. No, it didn't. So,
I did. That was my assumption as well.
Yeah. So that was fun.
Get your little electric tape plus sign.
Yep.
Shoot at that.
Shoot at that. Don't aim
it's
at
not going to bounce
bungee
off of
cords.
electrical tape.
That was dumb. All right, so now my best, most memorable shot.
Shot or hunting experience?
Yeah, I was kind of telling you about it in the blind. So I was hunting on November 4th, and I'd gotten out to the blind at 3 o'clock. And November 4th is prime rut. The deer are in full rut by then. So the bucks are chasing does. You're going to see deer all day. Those are when you want to go out and just do an all-day sit, because you could see deer from sunup to sundown. You don't know when a buck's going to come roaming through looking for a doe. If it's allowed, you can put out the doe estrus and doe urine. That's like doe in heat type stuff to try to get your bucks to think there's a hot doe around. You use your calls. It's really fun. It's a lot more fun than just sitting there quiet and hoping a deer walks by. I mean, you're interacting more. And so I got out there, and 20 minutes after I sat down in the stand, I heard a little grunt behind me, and a younger buck will make a different sound than an older buck. So a younger buck's like, and an older buck's like, and so I heard that. So then I grunted, and then this doe comes just barreling by me with her tongue hanging out of her mouth. She's been obviously being chased. And then this little buck follows her, and he's just a little spike horn. And they ran around me, and then he took off, and then I grunted again, and he came back.
And when you say you grunted, you're using the device that you showed me.
I had my call.
Which is this kind of flexible tube that is attached to a harder plastic tube that...
there's a reed in it, is what it is.
That has a reed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're blowing air past a reed, and then the grunt call itself is a flexible, corrugated pipe-looking plastic. This is the sound a doe makes. So you use these pins. So you attach it to yourself. So the tube is right here. And you suck in, so you don't get the moisture in here, so it doesn't freeze. So another buck might think a buck is on a doe. So he'll come try to check it out. But it's a little early to be doing this in this season. So then I blew on my grunt, and he lost the doe because she was running around in circles, and he couldn't find her. And then I'm grunting, driving him crazy because he thinks another buck has found this doe that he had no right chasing. He's just this little, year and a half old deer. And so then he just stops right in front of me and starts staring really hard. He would be looking away from me. So he's looking out in front of me because he was standing in front of me, and he's looking away from me. And his ears, just body posture, something's coming. So now I'm getting excited because I'm like, this is great. This is exactly the scenario you want. You want a hot doe running around. You want a little buck chasing her. And then you want his grandpa or someone to be like, get away from that girl, you little rascal. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, here we go. And it was a 3-point. So I'm like, okay, that's not really what I wanted. And so then they started sparring a little bit, where they dangle their, hit their antlers together just a little bit. And then they both start walking away, and I grunt again, and then they both come back, and I'm just having a blast. And then I look between my legs because I'm up in a tree stand, and walking in between the tree I'm on and the ladder I used to climb up is an 8-point.
Ooh.
The one that you've took the picture of.
Yeah.
That I have a European mount of. He walked right underneath me. And I actually had to wait for him to get further away so I could actually shoot. Because as you know, arrows have a trajectory and they arc. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I'm not shooting this thing at 5 yards. I don't know where to aim. My arrow hasn't flattened out yet, really. Yeah. And so once it got about 15 yards away, I took a shot and I hit good. And then he tried to bust through some brush that I had tied down to make a travel corridor so the deer couldn't walk where I couldn't shoot. And he tried to bust through that, and he couldn't. And then he expired just as soon as he finally made it through that. He went down. And so I had been hunting by that time about 40 minutes. It was the middle of the day.
Wow.
So I had all this daylight, which, usually never happens. You're usually dragging deer at night and someone's holding a flashlight when you're trying to gut it, and I mean, it was great. I was home. It was still daylight by the time I got home, and a nice 8-point, and saw 3 bucks.
Yeah.
That was a perfect hunt.
And you got to tease them a little bit with your call.
Yeah.
So something we haven't really covered before is what is that process like after you have your downed buck?
All right. So you found your deer, and you need to get it out of the woods. And most people gut the deer where they find it. Maybe you'll put it in a sled, because we do have a deer sled, which some people use ice fishing too, like those big sleds they pull behind them when they're walking out to go ice fishing or something. It's just a heavy duty sled, really. And so we have one of those. Some people have 2-wheel carts, but if you don't want to gut your deer where you found it, you might take it somewhere. The reason you wouldn't want to gut a deer is not because other deer will be scared of it. It's predators, coyotes and stuff. You sometimes don't want to say, hey, coyotes, come on my property. Look at this food I just laid out for you. So you might gut it someplace away from where you are, like maybe a piece of public land, which is totally legal. No reason you can't do that. Although with the diseases going on, they do want you to not transport deer carcasses across county lines in Michigan right now. We have CWD going on. So anyway, you need to get the guts out of the deer, and you want to do that as fast as possible because you're planning on eating the meat. And so having meat next to organs, most likely the deer has food in it. It has food that's ready to be pooped out. You don't want all that stuff around your deer. So you need to basically cool it down and get the organs out. So that requires you to do some knife work. And if you're good at it, which I'm not great, you can do it without getting too messy. But it seems like no matter what I do, I always end up getting a little messier than I wanted to. So a lot of people, they bring rubber gloves or sleeves that they can put over their sleeves so they're not getting their hunting clothes all dirty. But yeah, so you need to cool it down. Otherwise, I think when people say, hey, I've had venison, I don't like how it tastes. It tastes real gamey. Most of the time that's because the deer wasn't cleaned out properly, wasn't cleaned out fast enough, or it was left hanging too long.
What's your kind of time? What kind of window of time do you have there?
It depends on how cold it is. Yeah. Like if it's cold outside,
you got a lot longer.
You got longer. But if it's if it's 50 degrees is all the colder it's going to get all night, that deer isn't going to cool down much. I mean, it's 98 degrees and it only can go down to 50. Well, I mean, how long would you let a chunk of hamburger sit out at 50 degrees cooling down from 100? Before you're like, yeah, I could still eat this. It's like, I don't know about that. So the worst part about the guts of the deer is the anus, basically. I don't know what the rating of your podcast is. We of course don't say anus when we're talking as deer hunters, but you want to get that area out very well. Like, I mean, you really do spend your time and clean out that spot between the legs, because if you don't, there's usually poop in there. Yeah. I mean, not to get gross here, but there's usually poop. And so then your thighs are like where the most of your meat is. And so here you have decaying feces 100 degrees next to your meat. And then you're going to eat it, and then even if you cook it, it's still not going to taste very good. So you want to get that cleaned out. So that's usually the big thing we do the night we shoot it is do a real good job cleaning it out. We usually let it hang for 3 or 4 days if it's cold out, and then skin it and process it. It's good to let them hang for a few days. The blood and the proteins and the enzymes help you. It makes the deer taste better if you let it hang for half a week or so. If it's warm out, though, you got to take care of it. You don't have a choice. You got to just process it or send it to a processor so they can put it in a freezer or something.
So I think we can also add this to the advice for the person who wants to get started with their bow hunting. Find somebody who knows how to do this cleaning out process. Yeah. And make sure they're going hunting with you the first time. Yeah, there's videos, of course, but firsthand experiences, it's never going to go like how if you dissected a frog, you calling the teacher over and you're like, I don't know where the kidneys are. Doing it with a deer. It's a lot bigger animal. It's usually night. There's no YouTube video that's really going to show you how to get this done properly.
the ideal situation is you shoot the deer perfectly, so you haven't made a mess of the internal organs. It's about as together as you could hope. And then you find like a slight incline that you can drag it to, so the head is higher than the butt. So then when you open it, all the blood comes out and kind of washes down.
Yeah.
So then you can drag it away a little more even, so it's less stuff for you to kneel in. I mean, I guarantee the first time you've done it, if you didn't have somebody helping you, you're gonna make a mess.
Yeah.
And you're probably gonna potentially. My dad actually sliced his thumb open on an old broadhead that was in a deer that he killed. So if this podcast is also kind of like a hey, watch out type thing.
We want to give people real advice.
Yeah, don't just shove your hands into these deer and start rooting around to get them cleaned out, because they're tough animals, and there could very well be a broadhead in a deer already.
So this was not from his arrow that he had used to kill it.
From a prior hunt that wounded the deer, and he sliced his thumb right open on this broadhead that was in the deer.
Yeah, and that's not going to be sanitary conditions for slicing the thumb open?
No, he had to get some work done on it and take some antibiotics. And, rifle hunters too, when you shoot, you blow apart a rib. That's sharp. The bone is sharp, and you can easily cut your hands on these. So move carefully. Plus, you're reaching up into the chest cavity with a knife, trying to get everything out. And so you're holding a knife. You can't see. It's slippery. It's bloody. It's dark. I mean, lots of chance for injury. At my job, we have to do every other week safety tailgate meetings where we bring up potential safety things. And I've brought up the gutting a deer thing many times because we've ran out of office things we can do. We all work in an office setting, so how many times can you do ergonomics? So we all got to start talking about things we do at home and ways we could potentially hurt ourselves. So I've used, when you're gutting a deer and your hands are in the chest cavity, and everyone else in the office is like, this will never be an issue for me. I don't know, what if there's an apocalypse or something and you got to fend for yourself? You don't know.
Yeah. Climate crisis could help inspire a lot more people to become hunters.
That's right.
And I think it's still a valuable skill. As we're talking about on the drive back, at least as it exists now, it's not really the most viable thing to do as your primary source of protein.
Right.
Not unless you have a whole lot of time and money on your hands.
Yep. I know a lot of people where deer hunting is their main source of meat.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so when you get a deer, so how long is
so the back
the meat going to last your family?
Yeah, so the back straps are the best part of the deer. That's your tenderloin, basically. It's tenderloins and back straps are, filet mignon, basically. They're amazing. So usually you can get 4 meals from the back straps. Each one you can divide in half, and you cut them into like little steaks, like hockey puck size steaks, and that'll feed a decent group of people. Half of a back strap. If the deer's bigger, obviously you get more.
Sure.
And then the hind quarters, you get a lot of meat. Again, age of the deer matters, but what we do with our meat is we can it. We actually can the venison. That's the way we just like to eat it. So we process our own deer. So you take all your good cuts of meat, and then we just basically make them all stew size. So we end up with these huge, those like big silver bowls that everyone seems to have.
The mixing bowls.
But the big ones, like that you could like put a baby in. You know what I mean? Like they're huge. We fill up like 2 of those with stew meat, piled high, like a overflowing, and then we can it. And so each can of meat is like a large jar, like a thing of pasta sauce you would get at
a big mason jar.
Yeah, like a big mason jar. Thank you. And we usually do stuff like stroganoff. So you cook the noodles and then you dump that on there. Well, you only need 1 jar for that meal. So, we get, 16 or 17 jars like that.
Nice.
It's quite a lot of meals, really, for 1 deer.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of people, they make hamburger out of it. But again, we get a cow, so we're not short on hamburger.
Yeah, I knew one guy who always made a lot of sausage with his venison.
So getting the sausage and the meat sticks, which everybody hopes I do, because then they want it, and then I do share it, because, those are made to be shared. I always give some to my mom and stuff. When you get the sausages and stuff made, if you can't do it yourself, it is pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, venison is already the priciest meat on the planet. I mean, that property that we hunted on, I'm making a monthly payment on it. Not to mention the cost of all my gear, taxes, the license and fees, And it's like, so you shoot a deer and you get, let's say, 30 pounds of meat. It's like, all right, well, my price per pound is $270, or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, it's not a thing.
You're not doing it to save money. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So anyone who says they didn't want to do like antler point restrictions because they hunt to feed their family, it's like, what? Okay, that is the most inefficient way of feeding your family. Shooting a deer. I guess if you're hunting state land and you only have to buy a bullet for a gun that your dad gave you, okay, well then maybe. But
And you're really good and lucky.
yeah,
Because the time investment.
Yeah.
If just nothing else.
yeah, I'm not hunting deer because I need food. I'm hunting deer because I like how they taste and I like being out in the woods. Getting meals out of it is just a bonus for me. I've gotten a deer every year since I was like 20. I mean, it's usually just a doe, but that's all we really need.
And so you want to be getting into bow hunting because there are other aspects to it that you like besides the taste of venison.
Yep, that's just one of the many benefits of doing it.
Right. Is there any point regarding bow hunting or hunting of deer in particular that you feel we haven't covered at some point?
Well, we haven't really talked about the scouting
Okay.
and the determining of where you should even try to get a deer. Having your own property, of course, is extremely helpful because you can manage your property.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a new hunter and you want to get into it, you probably don't own 60 of your own acres. If you're lucky enough to have a family member that said, hey, you can hunt my property, you're the first person to hunt it, you're going to kind of be in the same situation as if you're hunting private land or public land. You don't know the land. So you really got to spend the time in the woods scouting around, learning where the deer go, patterning them. If you don't have the time and resources to put in food plots, which, when you do that because you're like, deer will come here to eat because I have put food here. You need to figure out, well, what are these deer eating? Oh, okay, there's a bean field on the other side of this property, like the neighbor's property. On the other side of the neighbor's property, there's a bean field. Okay, so the deer are crossing the neighbor's property to get to this bean field. Okay, where are they crossing? And you can start finding the runways where they go, and then try to find pinch points, which is areas where a deer will walk because it doesn't want to walk on either other side of wherever it's walking. So a big part of hunting takes place outside of October and November. I mean, you have to put in the time. And then you got to get your stuff in there relatively early so then you can leave the woods alone so that when you go in there to hunt, there hasn't been someone tromping around, breaking sticks, pushing brush back and everything.
So what time of year do you think is good for that scouting?
If you scouting all year, and remember, deer move differently in the summer than they do in the fall. So what you're looking at is what would a deer be doing at this time of year when I'm going to be hunting? Because they're probably not doing it now. Like a deer in the summer, I mean, I'm sure you've seen them. They're just out in fields, lollygagging around. They know they're not being hunted. They have babies. They act totally different. Bucks are all hanging together. They're all friends. Bachelor groups, and then when hunting season comes, everything changes because now food is going away, the bucks are fighting with each other, does are in heat, everything's different. So you just got to hunt it as where our deer are going to be traveling just to get their basic needs: bed, food, water.
Okay.
I mean, that's just where you're going to have to be. So you need to try to be out of the woods by September.
So when is the good time to do the scouting then?
Anytime before September.
So before September, you're trying to figure out
It's just because you don't want to be putting a bunch of your scent around where you're planning on sneaking in and hunting in October. You need to ambush these guys.
So it sounds like it can be pretty tricky to figure out what their October and November patterns are going to be.
Yeah, you got to use your experience.
Use your noodle.
I mean, it's hunting, not shooting, right? I mean, you're hunting. The deer, for you, you're out there, like we were enjoying the nice, quiet evening. For them, it was a fight for survival. I mean, if a big buck had walked in, we were going to try to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't a game to this buck.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was for us, just this is a nice relaxing evening out here and we could kill something. To the buck, it's just I could die. That's it. So he's going to act a lot differently than we are, because it's not a matter of life and death for us. So that's why scouting, you're basically like, where can I get this deer where it doesn't think I am, but I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
So trail cameras, but on public land, they could get stolen. I've had that happen. So it's a lot harder on public land. It really is. Your best bet is to have somebody who's a hunter that you can trust, hopefully, come out with you and maybe just show you a few things. I mean, maybe they'll show you stuff on their own property and you can take it as lessons, or everybody likes to walk around property. So to have somebody who knows what they're doing, walk with you in the woods, see what they see. I was pointing stuff out to you that, you're an experienced hunter, so you didn't know to look for it.
Nope.
But, I immediately see it because I'm just used to looking for certain types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And but time in the stand will also help. So just sitting there, pay attention to what the deer are doing, where they're moving, and if you have to move your stand, move your stand. Don't do the definition of insanity, expecting the same thing to change. I mean, if you keep seeing deer crossing over by that big pine, well, move your stand to that big pine. I mean, just decide like, all right, I'm moving over there, and then I'll maybe get one of these deer that.
But make sure you do that before September.
No, I'm saying like if you're hunting in October and you're seeing the deer crossing at a spot where you can't get them, move it. Move your stand. See if you can make that work, because obviously where you put it wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention. Don't just say like, oh, they're all too far away. Well, where are they? What direction are they coming from? Where can I move to where I can maybe get them now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a lot more complicated than just I've got my bow or your rifle or whatever, and I'm going to go out in the woods and I'm going to see a thing and shoot it.
Yeah. I mean, we also really didn't touch on like how much practice I do with my bow prior to hunting season. I try to shoot my bow every day.
Oh yeah.
Just one, to stay in shape, but two, to make sure it's working right. I mean, you only get one shot.
Right.
You gotta make it count.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I noted as we were heading into your blind. You only had a few arrows with you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter,
And only 2 of them had broadheads. The other 2 were field tips.
Oh, yeah. Because you're really only going to have time for a single shot.
Yep. And maybe you'll have to put an ammo out of its misery.
Yeah.
There are those amazing stories of guys getting 2 bucks or 2 deer, even a doe and a buck, in the same night at the same the same sit.
But there's thousands of hunters all the time. Yeah. And they're not.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Those stories are few and far between. It just feels weird to only go with 1 bullet in the chamber. You know what I mean? Like it's like, well, I'll have 2 arrows.
Yeah. You want to think of having that quiver full of arrows.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like if you miss, then that animal's gone. Yeah, your arrow's just sitting out there in the field.
Yep.
Because you missed.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, it's not like a bullet. You can go get it. Try again.
Right. And that one you shot at, it's not coming back.
No. You did a good job of scaring that one away.
So if you do miss and you scare that one away, does that mean that deer is unlikely to kind of return to that spot ever again?
There's no definites. It could come back.
Okay.
It might not even know. It might
not for a while.
Yeah, but it just might not even know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on my trail cameras, there's pictures of deer, and I've watched them when they just come out. They act like they're being harassed, and they're not. Like, you don't know what's up. Like, what's wrong with this deer? It's spooked, and it's just sometimes they're just really antsy. So it might have just chalked that up too. I don't know what that was, but I'm getting out of here, and I'll come back in a couple of days.
Or still just smelling something. And, like the one little pronghorn we saw today who smelled us but didn't know where we were.
Yep.
But it made it skittish.
Yep. Now, a big buck, if it caught the whiff of us that little buck caught, we wouldn't have seen him.
Yeah, that guy came real close.
That guy would have, a big buck more mature deer, if they get the slightest hint something's wrong, you don't see them. They're gone. They're like, nope, I'll go somewhere else. They're alive.
There's enough land here. I can go somewhere
They're
where
smart.
I'm feeling
that and a
less nervous.
big old matriarch doe. Man, there is not a smarter animal in the woods than a big old mature doe. If you're like, man, I need some venison, and there's 5 doe out there, and that one just constantly stomping and head bobbing, and yeah, take her out. She's the one that's making it hard for you to hunt, because she's the smartest animal in the woods right now.
So we approached the blind cautiously, trying to be downwind from the area that the deer usually enter the food plot from, but we weren't especially doing anything else to mask our scent.
Right.
What kind of measures might be taken otherwise?
So normally what I do is I have a ozonics machine and there's that bag hanging right over there, that big black bag.
I have no idea what that is. Ozonics machine?
Yeah, so it creates ozone.
Oh, okay.
O3. And it's a real good deodorizer. And it also gives a little bit of a masking scent that a deer doesn't associate with danger. So what I normally do is I hang all my stuff in that bag right there, and I dangle an ozone machine in it, and that de-stinkifies my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I immediately throw that stuff into my scent bag.
Right.
And then the clothes, normally what I do is when I go hunting, I strip right down to my underwear out in the field and put on clothes that were in that ozone.
Mm-hmm.
So all my clothes should be scent-free. And then I use scent-free shampoo. I don't brush my teeth with mint toothpaste. I use non-scented because mint isn't really a wood smell.
Yeah, it never would have occurred to me
Yep.
to think about what toothpaste was being used.
Yep. And then, your boots are rubber, so those don't hold much smell. But I do know some people, they put their boots in muddy water. They just keep their boots in muddy water just to help them not stink.
Wow.
And then you just want to try not to bring anything too stinky with you. I do wonder how much our phones smell. It seems to me they probably smell pretty bad because you're usually eating and touching your phone.
Yeah. I certainly was wondering a few times about the little noises that the phones might make at times, and obviously there were times where we were trying to be very quiet.
Yeah. I usually just have it on vibrate, and I don't think the vibration sound, if it's up against your thigh, is really that worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you definitely can't hear it very far.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things in the woods that make vibrating sounds. So, but you don't want to have Jingle Bell Rock as your ringtone going at full volume. That might cause an alarm.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So I know you not through hunting.
Right.
I know you because you also have another podcast that you do.
Yep.
But it is because of this podcast that I knew you were a hunter.
That's right.
The podcast is Cardboard of the Rings.
That's right.
Which is a long-running podcast for Lord of the Rings, the card game.
Yep.
Which is a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games.
That's the tagline.
And your favorite hero to play in this game, one of the Lord of the Rings characters, is
Haldir of Lorien.
And why in particular Haldir?
He has the most archery-ish ability, as I like to say. So there's many heroes in the game that have bows, and they have the ranged keyword, and
Legolas, obviously.
But Haldir's ability to me is the most bow-like. It's the most archery-like. He's a sniper. He can attack before the enemies attack you, which is if you had your archers out in the field hiding in trees, you're not going to say, well, let's let these orcs come in and get a few blows in before we start shooting arrows at them. You're going to take them out before they even get there. So that everyone that listens to the podcast, 99% of the people who listen to the podcast, I hate doing, everyone's, but knows that I'm an archer.
Yep.
And so no one is surprised that my favorite hero is Haldir. It just makes sense.
Yep. If anybody wanted to listen to your podcast, how could they find it?
Oh, we're all over the place. Facebook, YouTube. We're on all the podcast players. So it's just Cardboard of the Rings. It's about the card game. It's not about the movies and books, although that always creeps in.
Discussed a lot.
Creeps into every episode. But If you haven't played the game, you will be a bit lost, of course. But YouTube channels, you can watch some gameplays. I have a lot of gameplays. We're currently sitting right where I record my playthroughs of the game. And if you like Lord of the Rings, it's a really interesting game. And it's coming back into print. They currently finished 10 years of the game, and now they're starting to reprint it to make it more new player friendly. And then, as you may know, Amazon, the company, not the place in Brazil, is making a Lord of the Rings series. So I'm thinking there's going to be a pretty big resurgence of Lord of the Rings related fans and stuff. So I'm assuming this game is going to kind of get I don't want to say a resurgence because it hasn't really dipped in popularity ever, but it might get a new fan base. So it's funny when people hear that Lord of the Rings, the card game, is not my main hobby. That always kind of blows people's mind. They're like, really? I'm like, no, hunting is. And they're like, wow, you must hunt a lot because you put a lot of time into this. And it's true.
And that came through enough in the podcast that when I decided I wanted to do an episode about bow hunting, you were absolutely the first person that came into my mind.
All right, perfect.
Mm-hmm. But the theme of my podcast isn't Lord of the Rings, although I do love Lord of the Rings very dearly. It is Robin Hood. So before I let you go, I do need to ask, what's your association with Robin Hood stories? Are there any movies, books, or television shows with Robin Hood that you especially like?
I've pulled off a Robin Hood before. Robin Hood is when you have shot your arrow into an existing arrow in the target.
Oh, you've split the arrow.
You split the arrow, and so now you have
nice.
now you've ruined two $12 arrows.
Right.
So it's really cool when you do it once. The second time you do it, you're not very happy. You're like, God dang, that's like $25. Because
the first time, this was awesome.
Yep. Second time, oh, okay.
Yeah, arrows
that's
are not cheap.
Good grouping. So that's probably my official relationship with a Robin Hood, is I have pulled off a Robin Hood.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thanks for hosting me here in your house. Thanks for hosting me in your little tiny blind in the woods.
No problem.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, this has been just wonderful. I couldn't be happier with the hunt we had.
Yeah.
And
now, for the record, we had a very successful hunt, not a shoot.
Right.
I mean, we did shoot some deer, but with
cameras.
Cameras. Yeah.
Yep.
We got very close to a couple of bucks.
Yep.
And that was very neat.
Yeah, a lot of times the most successful hunts don't result in anything dying. It's the experience of the hunt itself.
Yeah, that was a great time and a beautiful day for it.
Thank you, Thaddeus. That was wonderful. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. Thanks for being on, Chad.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's play some Lord of the Rings.
Okay, sounds good.
My thanks again to Chad for his hospitality. I had a wonderful time out on my first hunt, even if I didn't return with any backstraps. I certainly found the experience extremely educational, and it's given me a much greater appreciation for how much more challenging it would be for a medieval outlaw to be hunting deer with a bow and arrow. Certainly far more challenging than the movies would have it seem. I look forward to a follow-up episode someday where we discuss the tactics that deer hunters in the Middle Ages would have used. In the meantime, if you have suggestions for future episodes, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all with the handle @IntoGreenwood. You can also contact us directly via intogreenwood@gmail.com. And while you're on any of those social media sites, if you want to share an episode of the podcast or recommend us to your friends, it really would mean a lot. A small, independent podcast with a niche subject like this survives based on word-of-mouth support. Although, speaking of support, even just a little bit, given on patreon.com/IntoGreenwood or ko-fi.com/IntoGreenwood, would go a long way towards helping us keep our quivers full. Trees, Water, and People remains our selected charity, with 10% of all funds we raise going directly to them. Into the Greenwood is produced and edited by me, Thaddeus Papke, and our theme music is by Plastic 3. Thank you for joining us in the Greenwood once again.
And there you can see deer poop. And just based on how it looks, that's actually buck. Because a doe is more pellety. When it's in a bigger clump like that, it's a buck.
It never occurred to me at all that does and bucks would have different looking poop.
It's usually because bucks are just bigger, so they just drop a bigger turd.